Today is Wednesday, August 26, 2026, and today is National Toilet Paper Day. Yes, really. The soft, perforated roll we all take for granted gets its own day. And if you're one of those people who still has a suspicious number of extra packs left over from the great toilet paper panic of 2020, congratulations. You're basically prepared for the next decade. That same spirit of quiet, practical reinvention runs through today's stories. A classroom that decided kids should learn by playing. A waterfall that started powering cities. And a car so small it barely looked like a car at all. Welcome to Wait, That's Random, This Day in History. I'm C.L. Burns, voice actor, audiobook narrator, and someone who enjoys finding the stories hidden between the dates. In 1873, in a quiet St. Louis suburb called Carondelet, a woman named Susan Blow opened something the United States had never seen before. A free public kindergarten. Not a fancy private school for the well-to-do. A public one for ordinary kids. The idea itself was almost radical. Instead of making 5-year-olds sit still and memorize things, Blow believed they should learn the way they naturally wanted to, by playing, building, singing, and exploring. She had studied the methods of a German educator named Friedrich Froebel, who basically invented the whole kindergarten concept. And she was determined to bring it to American public schools. So she did. One classroom, one teacher, a handful of children, and the quiet conviction that childhood didn't have to be a grim rehearsal for adulthood. It worked. Other cities noticed. Within a few decades, the idea spread across the country. Today, we take kindergarten for granted, but it started with one woman in Missouri who looked at little kids and thought, what if we just let them play? And once you start noticing how often the simplest ideas end up reshaping everyday life, it's hard not to keep looking. Which brings us to a much louder kind of reinvention, one that involves one of the most famous waterfalls on the planet. In 1895, engineers at Niagara Falls did something that still feels a little magical when you think about it. They took the enormous power of falling water and turned it into electricity on a scale the world had never seen before. This wasn't a small demonstration project. It was the first large-scale hydroelectric plant of its kind. Water that had been crashing over the falls for thousands of years was suddenly diverted through turbines, spinning generators, and sending usable power out to factories and cities. Aluminum plants, carborundum production, and eventually parts of Buffalo itself began running on electricity that started as nothing more than gravity and a very big drop. It was one of those moments when nature and human ingenuity shook hands and decided to get to work. The same falls that tourists came to admire were now quietly lighting homes and running machines miles away. Power had always been limited by how close you could get to a river or a coal pile. Niagara changed that equation. Suddenly, the idea that a waterfall could run a city didn't sound crazy anymore. And once you've watched a waterfall start lighting cities, it becomes a little easier to believe that something even smaller could quietly change the way we move. In 1959, the British Motor Corporation rolled out a car that looked almost like a joke at first glance. The Morris Mini Minor was only 10 feet long, yet somehow it seated 4 adults, had surprisingly roomy interior, and handled like it was built for the narrow, crowded streets of post-war Europe. Designer Alec Asiganis had been given a simple challenge: create a cheap, efficient car that ordinary people could actually afford and park. What he delivered was something closer to a revolution on 4 wheels. The engine sat sideways. The wheels were pushed out to the corners. Every inch of space was treated like it mattered. The Mini wasn't just small, it was clever. Within a few years, it had become a cultural icon. The car of choice for everyone from everyday families to movie stars to the swinging London set. It proved that you didn't need a big car to make a big impression. Sometimes the best ideas come in the most compact packages. Thinking about things that started small and ended up everywhere brings one particular childhood into focus. He was a skinny kid from New York with big eyes and a knack for looking completely ordinary until the cameras rolled. In 1990, at the age of 10, he starred in a movie about a boy accidentally left home alone who then outsmarts a pair of bungling burglars with a series of increasingly creative traps. The film became a phenomenon. Suddenly, the whole world knew his face. He was the kid who made the "keep the change, you filthy animal" sound like high art. Fame hit hard and fast. More movies followed. The spotlight never really dimmed. And then, just as quickly as it had arrived, he began stepping away from it, choosing a quieter life over the endless sequel machine that Hollywood kept offering. Today we're, of course, talking about Macaulay Culkin, born on August 26, 1980. What stays with me is how thoroughly he owned both sides of the story. The sudden, almost absurd level of childhood fame, and the later decision to live on his own terms. Not every child star gets to write the second half of the script. He did. And looking back across the day, it feels like a quiet celebration of things that started small and somehow kept growing. A single classroom that changed how we think about early learning. A waterfall that started powering cities. A tiny car that rewrote the rules of design. And a kid who became one of the most recognizable faces on the planet before deciding he didn't have to stay there. Anyway, if you're still working through that 2020 toilet paper stockpile, consider this your official permission to use an extra square today. You've earned it. Which reminds me of a line that feels almost right. The little things are infinitely the most important. Arthur Conan Doyle. If you'd like to explore more of my narration, podcasts, or general creative wandering, you can find it all at waitthat'srandom.com. I'm C.L. Burns, and I appreciate you stopping by for a while. I'll see you tomorrow.